SiGMA podcast. Today, bit of a big smile, just had some very positive news. We're going to be meeting with Pauline Saliba, again, the Executive Secretary of the National Coordinating Committee, which deals with anti-money laundering. And we're going to be continuing the discussion where we left off last time. Pauline, first of all, thank you for accepting our invite. Wanted to ask you, we spoke about the NRA, the National Risk Assessment.
Yes.
In 2023, what were the main findings of the NRA?
So in general, strictly speaking, so we saw that there was an improvement
Improvement in what?
when assessing the money laundering risk. So there was, when we compared with the previous iteration of the NRA, which was 2018, we saw that there was a decreasing residual risk in money laundering. But basically, this is not only as a result of all the effectiveness of the mitigating measures, I dare say, but also because we had better data tools as well to assess the risk. But keep in mind the grey listing process, so to get out of the grey list all the efforts that were done, it reflected as well in the money laundering overall residual risk.
Okay, few points there. So, the previous NRA was in 2018.
Yes, and first of all, thank you for the invitation.
Doesn't matter.
So yes, it was in 2018. It was a bit...
So why a gap? 2018 to 2023?
Agreed. So basically the NCC, what we are doing now, no longer an ad hoc process, but it will be every 3 years, in line with the national strategy. So there will be a national risk assessment every 3 years, which is good news also for the subject persons, because sometimes the subject persons, not sometimes, they need the national risk assessment in order to carry out their business risk assessments.
Okay. So, NRAs every 3 years, which is going to be different to where we stood up to last year.
Yes.
Then you mentioned better data tools. What do you mean by better data tools?
So first of all, there are two aspects. You need the data, you need to know how to use it, because it's useless having the data otherwise, unless you know how to use it. And keep in mind, my background is in economics, so statistics is key. We had, for example, STRs, go AML, so better indicators on STRs.
Okay. So you had more STRs?
Not only, so you have better indicators. So with regards to TF, money laundering by predicate offense or typology. So we had CASPAR, we had the business registry. CASPAR is the supervisory platform, so we have the risk evaluation questionnaires, we have data from them. What else? The business registry we used, for example, beneficial ownership, nationality and residency. So to understand whether there are risks in terms of TF, for example, targeted financial sanctions. What else did we have? Data on MPOs, data on two-board, the trust beneficiary registry. So all these, some of them were not there in the 2018 iteration, whereas now we had them. So possibly we had a better risk understanding because of these data tools. That's my line of thinking. And also, one thing I always emphasize when I do outreach, basically we used as well the data from the law enforcement when we talk about incoming international requests. Why? Because sometimes using only an STR, it's not enough. You might say it's not robust enough. It may lead to nothing. So quality is a key here, whereas when you have an incoming international request behind it, there's an investigation possibly in the other country. So it has more weight in our analysis. So that helps.
Okay. You mentioned data from law enforcement. Now, when you have twofold question here, and if you can't answer, I understand. But when you have law enforcement, which in certain instances, at least sometimes when I discuss with lawyers who are criminal lawyers, they say they add money laundering to the charge sheet to tick a box. And certainly, for example, you see the case of a butcher who's doing certain actions like exchanging checks. I understand there's, if anything, maybe there's tax issues over there, but not per se money laundering. So why does money laundering get tagged along, if you can answer that?
Basically, because nowadays money laundering is an all predicate offense, so you have to try to go to that route.
Even if the amounts are so small.
It depends, because then we prioritize when I say we, as in Malta, it depends whether you have a complex case, it depends whether it fits into the typologies, so not only the amount.
If we're talking about small amounts, a few
So that
hundred
would
euros, less than 2,000.
But in our case, in that matter, under the national risk assessment, it would fall, for example, under domestic small cases, because so first and foremost, the NRA, the 212-page document that is publicly available, behind it there are internal working papers. So in those working
Lord knows
papers,
how many documents were used to put the NRA together.
Exactly. So you have in all 18, because we had 18 working groups. These are all working papers behind, and one of them is basically the money laundering threats. And in it, you have all the details with regards to the predicate offenses, the financial crime investigations. So what are these? So we categorize between the amount laundered, the proceeds of crime. So those.
So there is a categorization. There is a, how do you say it?
A prioritization matrix, and in fact, if I may also, so it's nothing secret, we're working on it. The strategy will be launched, and in fact, in it, you will have, for example, in order to have a risk-based approach, the blessed word by the FATF, even the police have to prioritize, because otherwise your resources go all wasted.
Yeah, because
so you
you're
have
spreading
to
them thin.
focus. Exactly. It's not, but these are captured in our analysis, because then in the NRA, you would see, for example, we split between domestic and foreign. And also, it's also presented in the public document, which led to the most laundered proceeds of crime.
Which led to?
The most laundered proceeds of crime. Were they in Malta? Were they outside Malta? The amounts, were they irrelevant? Were they much more? So that is given a lot of weight in the analysis.
If I may go back to my original question, the findings of 2023 compared to 2018, gaming per se, what were the findings?
So basically in gaming we saw an improvement, so both iterations we split between, there was something new, we split between land-based and remote, and this round we included as well the recognition notice framework. So, the entities that are that are actually with a license from another EU, but given a recognition notice here in Malta. And they operate with that recognition notice. We included this as well. And there was an improvement in the sense that remote gaming was no longer high, but we have a medium. So residual risk is down, except for the category of recognition notice framework, where we see the recognition notice framework as an overall residual risk of medium-high. But before it was not assessed in 2018.
And any steps being taken vis-a-vis the recognition notice?
Yes, in fact, we have in the upcoming strategy, so it's the buzzword. We have in the upcoming strategy, we're not saying that no measures are being taken at this point in time, because first of all, we're relying on when I say we as Malta, but obviously it's the Malta Gaming Authority, we're relying on the fact that the AML-CFT framework is largely equivalent in that country where the license is issued, is largely equivalent to ours.
Especially if they're European-based.
Especially if they're European-based. However, actions are being planned, starting with a proper risk assessment on this 100. We have 111 operators under this recognition notice.
Operators or operators and B2B suppliers, or you're distinguishing?
There are B2B 46 out of these 111.
So, and you monitor the 46 as well?
They should be, yes.
Even though they're B2B?
Even though they're B2B. And their licenses are renewed every year. So basically, we're not saying there is nothing, but the effectiveness of the mitigating measure needs to be enhanced.
Okay. So.
Numbers, I like numbers. So basically.
There is also a European Union supranational assessment, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that European Union supranational assessment, does Malta provide information towards it? If yes, Is there anything gaming specific?
Now, for our followers, because for sure everyone will have heard about it, with the 6th AMLD, it will no longer be EU supranational risk assessment, so EU SNRA. It will be, if I'm not mistaken, risk assessment at union level.
Okay.
As from 2028, there will be this new approach. Yes, we contribute, but the thing is, so we contribute, meetings are held, not specifically with me, for example, they will reach out to subject persons, etc.
That's how they do it?
Yes, and there are one-to-one meetings, but the thing is that basically, although as an authority we do not provide input, unless obviously they reach out to you, and there are meetings where they actually say you can reach out to them as well, we have to take into consideration their findings. So in carrying out the 2023 NRA, we have to take on board the latest iteration of the EU supranational risk assessment and consider them in our assessment. Now, if you diverge from the findings of the EU SNRA, you have to explain why you diverged as well.
Okay, so let's say the EU finds ABC in gaming, but you find XYZ.
Yes, in fact, because I didn't answer your second part of the question, the EU supranational risk assessment is very detailed. It has per sector, per product, with the assessment of threats, vulnerabilities, mitigating measures. For gaming, there is as well. And we diverge specifically when we talk about, they refer to it, EU supranational risk assessment, as online gambling, we refer to it as remote. But the EU found that when we talk about online gambling, there is the highest category of residual risk, very high.
Why?
Exactly. Do not
Especially
yawn
because
it's I start yawning.
I've been awake since 4:30 a.m.
Now,
For the benefit of our viewers, it's already 11:30.
now, let me remember what I was going to say. Yes, online gambling. They give the driver of this very high risk category is in fact in relation to virtual assets. Because in online gambling,
we allow crypto into a certain extent.
Yes, and the EU SNRA says that with online gambling, the use of virtual assets is a main driver with regards to residual risk because of its anonymity. Now, if I may, in our risk assessment, in our NRA, we also, if you go in the category of remote gaming, and I encourage the readers to go through it because we present it I mean, not just the risk, but dissected. Sorry. In fact, the remote gaming sector in Malta, it's a medium residual risk, not very high, and we've gone down from the previous 2018 NRA. But the main driver is in fact the fact that you can have placement of illicit funds in remote gaming through the virtual assets. And it has a medium-high residual risk. Now, if I don't know your next question, but if I may
my next question is, what other member states have this sort of reality? Are you aware of any member states having this?
Which reality? Our finding?
The virtual assets, which put us at a high risk.
No, because that was my next answer. Next answer, why? Because if I may, and I'd like to emphasize this because I know MGA might also get a bit offended. Strictly speaking, when we did the NRA, it was cut-off date 2022. Okay. So we did not take into consideration the distributed ledger technology policy. We still have to assess the effectiveness of this mitigating measure, which...
Vis-a-vis the future NRA.
Exactly, which at prima facie, a priori, I see it as a very robust tool. So that is yet to come. So basically, when we saw this medium-high driver, it's because, as things stand, we did not see that we have enough mitigating measures. Now, another thing, because you said other EU member states. The EU SNRA says that almost all the EU member states do not have mitigating measures in place in order to counteract this residual risk with regards to virtual assets. So that is important. But then, We included why we diverged from that finding of the EU SNRA. Why? Because the recommended mitigating measures by the EU, we already adopt them. So when they say, for example, the non-face-to-face, these are already there. So we need something more. And that's why I'm saying maybe now with the distributed tool, the fact that you have prohibition of privacy coins, a priori concessions. Also the fact that we have MiCA, it mirrors almost exactly our virtual financial regime. So that will be an added mitigating measure that we have to assess, as yet, not yet assessed.
Okay.
I took
A lot to discuss.
Yes, and there's a lot to assess as well.
So, virtual assets lead to a higher residual risk. Any other factors which lead to high residual risk?
Then we had the recognition notice framework. So here, I mentioned it, here we need to assess more as well. And if I may also, because it's to be highlighted, so it's not just sticking to the NRA and saying, so the other sectors will have no problems, because it's important to highlight when we talk about the residual risk, we've taken into consideration the mitigating measures. At national level, we have done a lot. And again, referring back to the US NRA, for example, the US NRA states that as a recommendation, there has to be increased cooperation. That, not because I'm the NCC, but that we have helped a lot. Guidance and outreach, there is a lot.
And, sorry if I may, have the MGA made the case to maintain the recognition notice?
Yes.
They
It's not something that we're taking off. In fact, in the strategy, we're aiming at having added mitigating measures, not removing it. And I agree with this because at the end of the day, risk-based. So rather than deleting a process, risk-based, and be sure that we have a good risk assessment on the topic. I was going to mention only because you said what are other higher risks. And if I may, possibly not a higher risk, but the fact that we have the remote gaming, it's the sector, and in fact the FIU published their annual report very recently, the sector that submits the most STRs. But then we need to focus. So there are elements where we need to focus.
How much action is taken on those STRs?
So that's my next.
I'm going to get, because let's not talk about Malta now. I mean, I'm MLRO for a number of, for even UK licensees. We file regular STRs. If you ask me how many follows do we have on that, on what we file, I'll tell you 2 to 3 a year.
So follows, when you mean follows, what do you mean
we
by
get
follow-up?
feedback from the
feedback. So that is very important, the feedback mechanism. Why? Because some of the STRs are not leading to anything, so quality-wise. So that is...
Is it the quality of the STR, or did they find nothing in their investigation, or didn't they have the time?
No, the quality of the STR. So when we talk about quality, one of the criteria would be, does the STR lead to anything? So is it disseminated to the foreign FIU? Is it disseminated to the police for an investigation? If it doesn't lead to any of these, then the quality needs to be improved. That implies on the risk understanding. And also there is another factor which we saw from the NRA, which I was a bit surprised. There are a number of operators in Malta from the remote gaming that did not even submit one STR. And between them,
that is where you need to go and have a look and knock on their door and say, SiGMA, do you have an AML policy? Do you have a compliance program?
Exactly.
Do you have an MLRO? Do you have SAR forms?
What has that maybe, because I'm always number driven. Between them, they have 2.7 million active players. So that
there's something weird there.
That is not a small amount. So
no, there's something wrong over there.
Although we're saying the residual risk in the remote gaming sector has gone down, I always say I'm the one that sees the glass half empty.
Full, half empty.
There's always room for improvement. So basically, yes, although risk has decreased, we have a lot to do.
We have just the last 2 to 3 minutes,
okay,
if I'm not mistaken.
Fine.
Last time you mentioned to me that we have thousands of volunteer organizations. This is linked to TF now.
Okay, Mana, let me switch my mind.
55 of them
yes.
actually donate the charities.
Remembered or they are...
The charities are based and they
yes.
go abroad.
Yes.
What sort of checks are done on these 55 entities?
That is why, now, again, Mena, so 55 for me as a comparison, as a percentage, because you have to see in relative terms. are a small
55
amount.
out of
Yes, out
over
of
1,000.
1,700. They are a small amount, first of all. But if you were to read the specific chapter in the NRA, there is highlighted that there we have the main driver of the residual risk when we talk about MPOs and even when we talk about TF, because they are linked. Why? Because you need to monitor, as you are saying, you need to monitor what is happening with these disbursements. And that we are still lacking. And in fact, we're working on having planning and monitoring, more partnership follow-ups. So this is as well in the strategy. So you hit the nail on the head.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank
it was
you
a
very
pleasure to
much.
host you.
The pleasure is mine.
We'll be following up again just in a few weeks or a month's time. Let's see what sort of news we get on an AML front. In the meantime, I'd like to thank all of you for following, and I urge you also to push the subscribe button in order to keep up to date with all that is going on at SiGMA.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you.